with a lot of great news and encouraging situations we want to share with you. And with the upcoming Kentucky Family Forum, which is just over a week away. David, thank you not only for being with us, but for the Family Forum and all the things that are building toward that. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Greg, good to be with you, and we're excited for what the Lord has in store coming up week from Saturday.
Yeah, and we're going to share a little bit more about with you as we close out today's episode, but we want to touch on the voter guide that many of you hopefully got in the Citizen and the responses to that. Also, we want to talk a little bit about churches and pastors and what they truly can do, legally do. If they're not fearing man, there's things they can do that are legitimate and good, and we'll talk about that a little bit, plus some of the people that are going to be on the church panel at the Family Forum. We've highlighted some people throughout, so we're going to talk about that. And so, David, kick us off with the response to the governor's voter guide that was in the Citizen, just came out a week or two ago.
We've had a tremendous response, which is encouraging our hope and desire putting together this issue, this nonpartisan, issue-based, church-friendly voter guide. Comparing where Governor Andy Beshear stands on some important issues, where his Republican opponent, current Attorney General Daniel Cameron stands. We included a copy of that in our Kentucky Citizen publication that went out, but we also have it available as a standalone, easy-to-print PDF on our website, and we've got a new election resources page on our website, and if folks go to our website at kentuckyfamily.org/vote, they can get this resource. They can get a link to another online voter guide resource at votekentucky.us that has information on some of the other constitutional officer statewide races that are on the ballot on November 7th, and some other resources. But we've just had a tremendous response, Greg. We have probably, between the Citizens and the standalone guides, already distributed well over 50,000. I think we're going to have to order some more copies. So we're in that, as you and I talked, I think ties into some of the biblical worldview discussion that we've had, saying there is a desire among churchgoers to have their church equip them on important issues of the day, and certainly where they stand on where candidates stand on important values issues is a big part of that. So let me just take a step back. We have an election coming up, Greg.
If it didn't know.
Tuesday, November 7th. We don't want to, sometimes you and I, we talk about these things so much we assume things. Tuesday, November 7th, here in Kentucky, voters will be voting on all the statewide constitutional officers: governor, attorney general, auditor, agricultural commissioner, secretary of state,
education,
all those statewide races. And I thought, and Greg, you agreed because it's your program, that it would be helpful to take a step back and remind our churches, our pastors and congregants, the vast freedoms that we have to educate and equip the church to be good stewards with the votes that they have. And so
let me remind our listeners, because I've said this for years, David. And I've asked pastors about this and to do this, and I think it's going to tie right in. And then I want you to pick up and go with what they can and can't do. But one of the main things is that pastors and churches can clearly teach biblical principles and directly tie them to issues. Not a candidate per se, but the issues, so that their members and constituents and voters within our state can know the where the Bible stands and how they can best honor and represent the Lord. That's the main thesis of that. So tell them legally how that fits in, what they can do and can't do.
So and again, on our election resources website that I just mentioned on our website, we've got links to some additional church resources. So some great guidance from our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom, a Christian legal organization that has a great document on some of this. Also, an even more concise version that is titled Church and Government, Know Your Legal Rights, that our friends at First Liberty Institute have put together. Both of those are downloadable and easy to share on our website.
They could take those that you're talking about and these kind of things, download them and print them at their church office, and just let people have them. They're
Absolutely.
nonpartisan.
Right.
Yeah. They're not opinion. They're on record. Those kind of things.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
But just to kind of go through the basics, and as we're thinking about churches and what churches can do, and what they can in terms of the state of law, Greg. First off, most everything that we're going to talk about are things that churches can do.
Yes.
So churches can register their members to vote. And to remind folks, the voter registration deadline here in Kentucky, I believe, is October 10th. So if you have folks who haven't who are not registered or have moved and haven't updated their voter registration, you can help facilitate that and encourage folks to do that.
Now, you can't encourage them or force them in any way to vote for a particular or register for a particular party.
Right.
But you can have the voter registration
Absolutely.
there. Turn it in. Yes.
You can pass out nonpartisan voter guides like the one that we produced, and folks can request more copies of that if they'd like to. There's other things that churches can do. If say a church wants to host a candidate forum, and wants to invite all the candidates to come speak,
regardless of who comes,
and
right?
regardless
of
who comes, invite all the candidates in a race, and you can do that. And then certainly, Greg, as you already talked about, churches can speak directly about specific issues, specific pieces of legislation. In addition to voter guides, they can, these are not legislative races that are going to be on the ballot in Kentucky this go round. That'll be next year that we have all the state house and Congress. But you can educate folks on voter records. We put together a legislative voter record, a legislative scorecard for the state legislative candidates. These are all things that churches can do, and Greg, as we talked about, speaking to issues and what the Bible has to say, not only can churches do, we would say they should, and they're called to do that, not to overly politicize, but when the opportunity arises to speak to what the Bible has to say about these issues. You and I have been talking the last couple weeks about how the issue of abortion has been a front and center issue in the governor's race, the issue of battling the transgender identity and whether children should be able to be, quote unquote, transitioned or not. Those have been obviously big public issues, and certainly churches can take the time to speak to those issues.
Yeah, and David, here's the thing: they are public, they are political issues, but first and foremost, those are biblical issues.
Moral issues. Absolutely.
And we are obligated to stand on those, on God's truth on those, and help people understand them. How they vote is up to them. But pastors and teachers and leaders are obligated to stand on God's truth and help others do the same.
Absolutely.
Right.
So really the two main things that churches can't do is to, as a church, as an organization, endorse or oppose a particular candidate, or to use and something I don't know that I've actually ever seen a church have a desire to do, to actually, donate church funds to a particular candidate, right? But look, while we say that churches can't do those things, we do need to remind folks that pastors, in their individual capacity,
in their right as a voter,
as a citizen of this country, they don't give up their First Amendment rights just because they're a pastor of a church. And I'm not saying it might be the right thing to do or the prudent thing to do in certain circumstances, but pastors can certainly, in their individual capacity, endorse candidates, support candidates, donate to candidates, in accordance to the laws that apply to any other person as it relates to those kinds of things.
Just be prudent and wise in how you do
that. Absolutely.
You don't stand up in front of the congregation and say, I'm not the pastor now, I'm just a citizen and a voter. Here's what I would do. Have the separate meetings, do it in different ways.
And look, there certainly are pastors that do that, and there has been there has been a movement over the years of Pulpit Freedom Sunday, where pastors have in their capacity as
I would agree with that. I would agree with them doing that.
So I don't want to get too far down in the weeds in that, but let's just say there are a lot of, and I may have mentioned some of those Christian legal organizations that are more than willing to someday, if the IRS so determined, to try to challenge a pastor for speaking using their First Amendment free speech rights to engage in an election, that are more than willing to defend them. Because as Greg, we hear this talked about a lot. The threat of tax exempt status loss, and certainly we are seeing the other side, and by that I mean hardcore, leftist politicians, and some even after some of the recent Supreme Court decisions saying, the IRS should go after churches. While we certainly disagree with that, there has not been a church that has lost its 501c3 status because of how it's on those types of issues. Right. But we're not here encouraging to promote that per se. We just want to equip folks on the broad rights that churches have, how they can equip folks, and then also to remind pastors that they are still have all the First Amendment protections that any other citizen has.
Right. Every pastor and church leader.
Now, again, prudence and how the church may decide that they want those kinds of things handled are obviously left up to the church and the authority under which.
But don't run from it in fear.
Right.
Don't run from
There's
it in
no
fear.
reason to be in fear, and so many times, Greg, and I know you know this. What has happened is it is not because of some law or concern about what the IRS may or may not do that has caused churches to be silent on important issues. It has been just a general fear of the way the way the culture is going to respond. Right. It has not been a legal issue that has caused this. So we just wanted to take an opportunity with the interest in the election growing and the voter guide to remind churches of what their rights are so that we can be good stewards of the unbelievable rights and freedoms that we have in this country that a lot of places in the world do not have.
Right. Well, and David, as we close out today, I know we've talked about it, so let's share a little bit more. We always highlight, we want to talk about the Family Forum coming up a week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
Saturday, October the 7th. In line with what we've shared today, I'm going to give you two names. We've already talked about one, Josh Hirschberger and David Clausen. Tell our listeners a little bit more about them. They'll be on the church council.
Yeah, we'll have a one of the panels during the event on Saturday, October 7th. Our Family Forum will be a church and pastors, how to be salt and light in the culture panel. David Clausen from the Family Research Council will be talking more about the Biblical Worldview Study. Josh Hirschberger works for our Indiana Family Policy Council ally, and he leads the Church Ambassador Network initiative there in Indiana. We have recently just launched the Church Ambassador Network initiative here in Kentucky, and we're going to be sharing more about that. But to give folks a preview, the heart of that ministry is to connect the shepherds of God's church with the shepherds of His government in relationship.
That's great.
For to impact the culture,
which I believe is God's design.
That is, and we'll be talking about that more and about how folks can engage here in Kentucky in that initiative at the forum. So we're excited about it. Folks can get tickets at KentuckyFamily.org. We have a few individual tickets remaining, and folks can still use the discount code that we mentioned last week, 10 off, 10 OFF. To save $10 on the ticket that includes lunch.
There's a code that you can put that in when you go to KentuckyFamily.org. The promo code. It's 10OFF, no spacing or anything, and you get $10 off. Just a few seats left, so jump
and
on that.
And you're going to be on that panel as well, Greg.
Okay, I'll probably be listening a lot. But I do appreciate being a part of that. I'm looking forward to it. We want to thank you as listeners for watching us, for listening, and or if you go watch it on the video again. Thanks always for your prayers, and thanks to the Lord, always to Him. Join us again next week, and we appreciate that. And now listen for Bill Reeser and Encounter coming right up, and then at 12:45, my good friend Greg Horn and Hope is here. I'm Greg